Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Power of Adult SEL in Youth Development. I'm John. I'm the Program Manager for Harmony and Inspire at National University, and I welcome you to our webinar for today. We host these webinars and we invite thought leaders in education to share topics to inspire the best teaching and social emotional learning support. Opinions and content in this presentation are that of our featured guests and may not necessarily be a direct representation of Harmony or Inspire. If you're watching the recording, you will all receive a recorded version after the webinar for you to watch again and share with your colleagues. For best viewing, we do recommend that you shut down your other browsers. And throughout today's webinar, our goal is to make this a conversation. So we ask that you ask questions in our question box and we will address them as we have the time. Let's look at our objectives for today. First, we want to explore ARR's Ready Toolkit to identify organizational readiness, specifically staff well-being, beliefs, and skills that influence implementation of SEL in out-of-school time learning environments. Next, we're going to hear about strategies of how staff well-being and capacity building can impact youth outcomes. And third, we'll gain a deeper understanding of SEL skills supported through healthy role models and mentors in youth development in our new online Coach Mentor Blueprint module. That's part of our Inspire modules that we'd like to share with you. Now, to get this conversation started, I want to ask everyone in our audience, what is your role across the youth development space and where are you located? If you would answer those in the question box for us, that would be fantastic. I want to know what it is you do that impacts youth in your community and where is your community? So please fill those out in our question box.
We have the Executive Director of School-Age Childcare from the YMCA in New Jersey joining us.
Welcome.
We have instructional assistants. We have a nutritional and physical activity educator. We have an elementary counselor. We have an admin. We have a school counselor, Boys and Girls Club from Denver. We have the Director of Youth Programs. We have a grant writer in New Mexico. We have a staff training coordinator in Denver as well, school counselor in Minnesota, site coordinator at the YMCA in Massachusetts, Director of School Care in Pennsylvania. We have participants from Seattle. We have a curriculum developer from California. So great representation across the nation today.
As per usual, great representation. And again, we welcome each of you. We thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. And now one of my favorite parts of our webinar is when I get to introduce our amazing guests, our amazing panelists. First, I want to introduce Jessie Newman. She's Senior Research Director at ARR, the American Institute of Research. She's a senior researcher who leads research, evaluation, and capacity building initiatives in collaboration with a variety of national, state, and local entities. Her work is primarily focused on positive youth development and social emotional learning in supportive learning environments, including out-of-school time and informal learning settings. She is pursuing a PhD in educational psychology at the University of Illinois, Chicago, with a focus on how adults create supportive learning environments in out-of-school time. Welcome, Jessie. Next, we have Daniel Hatcher, who's the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships and Alliance for Healthier Generation. Daniel is a Senior Director, where he has served since 2008. Originally from Kentucky and now living in Washington, D.C., he's certified in mental health first aid, wilderness first aid, and is certified nature and forest therapy guide. Welcome, Daniel. And third, we have Dr. Caitlin Okamoto, Director, Coach Mentor Training, U.S. Soccer Foundation. Caitlin is a practitioner scholar who embraces the opportunity to bring theory and research onto the field and into day-to-day of sport coaching. She has over 2 decades of coaching experience at the collegiate, youth, and community level. Her areas of research and scholarship include youth work in sports, action research, youth development, youth participatory action research, and social work and sports. Quite the inspiring audience, and I welcome you all to turn on your cameras and join me here if you would. Welcome, welcome everyone. Great to see all of your faces. And to get us started, what I'd like to do now is start with an icebreaker. And this is a quick connection card. We use these for those of us familiar with Harmony, our Harmony program. These are the quick connection cards that we use for our students to help them start conversations and engage with one another. And so I like to use them to begin engagement with the audience here. So considering the audience that we have today, I wanted to ask this question. If you could choose to be anywhere in nature, mountain, beach, ice cap, desert, where would you be and why? And we'll start with Jessica.
Hey everyone, I think, well, this is a tricky question. I think I would say the beach on a lake in northern Michigan, very specifically, or the Joshua Tree.
Quite specific.
Yes. It's very peaceful up there.
Excellent. Caitlin, what about you?
No, John, I have to go with mountains. I grew up in northern New Mexico in Taos and love the opportunity to like just get out to hike and to often be without service, so I can be in my own thoughts and reflect. And so the mountains bring me peace and center me. And so now you got me thinking about mountains. I gotta get focused here.
Okay, I understand that. I can definitely relate. Daniel, what say you?
Love this question. So yesterday was National Walking Day, so I'm going to pick my favorite trail here in Washington, D.C. It's called the Metropolitan Branch Trail, one of my favorite spots.
Excellent, very good. And I would be somewhere in the woods. It's funny, I lead hiking groups, but I live in Florida, so my friends in California, where National University is, they say, no, John, you don't lead hikes, you actually go for a walk in the woods. Florida, we consider those hikes. We don't have elevation per se, but we're still hiking, exploring in the woods. And that's something that I love to do. I love being active outside, being engaged. And so now, thank you all for coming on. Now, I'm going to turn off my camera. I'm going to pass the mic to Jessie. Jessie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I see someone in the chat now is from Northwest Michigan. They know what I'm talking about when I say very specifically the beach on the lake in the northern Michigan area. So thank you everyone for having me. I wanted to start out with a story. Maybe it's a scenario is probably the better term here, right? But I think we're all in the out of school time, youth development, social and emotional learning space. We've probably seen this before, program leadership. So many of you attending today, for example, they go out, they learn about something new and great, they bring it back, to the school or the program, and maybe they do some training, they give some folks materials, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do this new thing. You have everything you need, go forth. And what happens, right? Maybe it's lovely, birds are chirping, everyone's happy to be doing this new thing, and it goes off, without a hitch. Also, maybe there's some staff resistance or confusion. Maybe young people aren't super engaged. There's some implementation challenges, right? We've got a lot of program staff attending as well. Does this sound familiar, right? It's really common because change is tricky. It's inevitable. We're evolving as a field and within our organizations all the time, but it's challenging. Why? One idea is that as we roll things out, big or small, if we do them before we're ready for them, before we've taken some time to think intentionally and to get ready, we might run into challenges. So I'm here to talk about what readiness is, why it's important, what to think about when it comes to getting ready for change. Again, whatever that change is. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. So let's go on to the next slide. We're really interested in this idea of readiness, right? John said, I'm from the American Institutes for Research. We're researchers and technical assistance consultants. We're pretty nerdy. But as researchers, evaluators, TA providers, we see this all the time, right? We'll come in to do an evaluation. Maybe things didn't work out as folks had hoped. We're hearing these stories that all come back to this idea of readiness, but folks in our field haven't really been talking about that as an idea. So we built on some really good existing research on readiness that was happening in other fields, and we've applied it to the out of school time space. We created this free toolkit where you can come to stop, learn more about what readiness is. You can think and reflect using a reliable and validated readiness assessment tool, and then you can act to move forward with resources that would help you build readiness for implementation. I'm not here to preach about the toolkit. We'll share the link later. But I did want to just share the framing of the toolkit because that's where we are today, is in the stop phase. I want to share with everyone more about what readiness is and how it's relevant to the conversation that we're having today. So let's go to the next slide. What is readiness? When we talk about readiness, we're really talking about the overall willingness and capacity within an organization and its staff and stakeholders that enables change to occur successfully. Change can take many forms, right? It can mean revamping your program completely. It could be implementing a new set of activities or strategies. It could be continuous improvement to existing practices. But its success hinges on having strong program operations, willing and able staff, and engaged stakeholders that are ready to make whatever the change is happen with intentionality and quality. So go to the next slide. I'm going to unpack this a little bit more. One of the, I think, more complicated aspects of readiness is that it's both general and specific. So I'm going to talk about the specific part first. We've observed that so often when program leaders and staff are getting ready to make a change, this is where they tend to go. They focus on whatever the new thing is, those specific practices, the supporting materials, the training that's needed for the specific thing. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to use social and emotional learning as an example here, right? If that's the thing that we're getting ready for, we're ready when we have safe and supportive conditions for learning, we're engaging in practices that are culturally competent and responsive, we have a plan for explicit and embedded social and emotional skill building, right? That's readiness that's specific to social and emotional learning. But there's a lot more to being ready for SEL overall. Things like strong program operations, for example, really important to make sure that your program is one that creates an atmosphere that's open to change, has intentional practices for collaborative decision making, and ensuring that the changes are aligned with your organizational mission, your priorities. Staff well-being, skills, and beliefs. We're going to talk about this in greater detail, right? But ensuring that staff feel good, feel whole, that they see the value in the change and that they have the skills to do the work, right? Taking stakeholders, particularly young people and families, into account and having intentional processes for engaging them in decision-making, making sure you're keeping them informed. We really have to understand and pay attention to all of those things too, in addition to the specific things, to make sure that we're ready. And we really like this gears model because we've observed, and so far, I think the research is growing, but so far the research suggests that there's no one element of readiness that's really much more important than the others. Rather, like gears, they all need to work together to ensure that change happens successfully. So they're all important. For the purpose of today, though, I do want to call out one part that I think is most salient to our conversation. That's the purple gear around staff well-being, skills, and beliefs. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to unpack that a little bit. This, I think, is an evolution in readiness thinking. Staff are essential, okay? The earlier readiness work, if you ever want to dive into the literature and really nerd out, you can let me know, focused a lot on organizational readiness. But what we've learned is that organizations really don't get ready. People get ready. They're the ones doing the work on the ground. Stands to reason that they're the most important part of making sure that implementation goes well. So there are three things we really need to consider before we get to implementation as a key part of readiness. The first is well-being. Our staff showing signs of stress and strain, for example, are frustration common? Is the heavy workload reducing staff effectiveness? These are just some of the questions that go into staff well-being. Do staff believe in whatever the new thing is, right? Do they perceive that there's an advantage, and does this new thing align with their personal values and beliefs? So for example, if we're using social and emotional learning, do they think that time on SEL is time well spent? Do they think they have a role to play in helping young people develop socially and emotionally, for example? This is really important and something you should be thinking about, ideally, before you get to the part of implementation. Last part, self-efficacy, right? This idea that they have the knowledge and skills to engage in, for example, social and emotional learning, and that they believe that they can. Are they motivated to do that? Do they feel like they could handle challenges that may arise with social and emotional learning, as an example, right? Do they have the growth mindset where they think that even if they don't know exactly what to do, that they could learn how to do that, for example? So these are 3 buckets that are really important when it comes to readiness, particularly as it relates to staff. And, you know, there are tools out there to help you think about readiness. We'll talk about some of those today, specific to staff. The other thing I just want to say about readiness is that usually when I start talking about it, it might feel a little overwhelming. Like usually the reaction I get is like, wait, I need to think about all of this before I can even do the thing I was planning on. And it's like, well, yeah, actually, but also there are some things we've learned about readiness that I think are really important to keep in mind. Let's go to the next slide. We've been learning a lot about readiness, particularly in the out of school time space over the last few years. You can read more about it in this brief that we just released about what is readiness. We'll share the links for that. But we've learned that readiness is ongoing. It's not something that you have to be 100% ready for before you can begin. And honestly, you might never be 100% ready because things are always changing. Rather, this is something that you can build over time. It's something that you should be paying constant attention to, again, because of those shifting dynamics, right? What's most important is that you understand what readiness looks like, both in terms of the concepts and then what it looks like for you and your organization, and that you take what you know to adapt implementation to your level of readiness. I think things will go better, right? If you understand it can improve your operations or better support staff or better engage your stakeholders, like young people, for example, if you know where they are. So what I've shared are just some things that we're learning about readiness. I'm going to pass it back to John, and I know we'll talk more about tools that can help to support staff and build that readiness going forward.
Outstanding. I have to say, I laughed when you were so specific when you were explaining where you want to go for vacation, but I love that you brought that same specificity into explaining what readiness actually looks like, because sometimes I used to laugh about this when I was, well, with my kids when they were younger, and even with my students, when you say, okay, get ready, it's like, okay, what exactly does that mean? So I love how specific you were in the points that you gave us. So what I'd like to do now, I want to ask the audience, again, we like this to be very participatory. So in our audience, what's something that Jesse shared that resonated with you in your current role? Or even we can extend that to just in general, because I know some of us, we work in youth sports after school, but we teach during the school day. We're also parents. We may be coaches outside of that. We may coach our own kids. So what's something that Jesse shared that resonated with you? If you would please share those in the question box. And Amanda, if you see as they're coming in, if you just want to share out some of those, that would be fantastic.
Great. Organizations don't make changes, people do.
Very good point. Very, very good point.
Staff buy-in is very true. Appreciate the point that organizations don't get ready, but people get ready.
We agree.
The idea that change needs to match the personal values, beliefs of your staff for their willingness to change. The idea of continuing readiness, the staff well-being slide. We don't need to be 100% ready, just readiness, period. Things and situations are always changing. Readiness is ongoing, and make sure that your staff is supported.
Excellent. We love all of those. Thank you to our audience for sharing. Thank you, Jesse. And so my takeaway, my framing of this is be prepared, be intentional. So thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to pass the mic to Daniel. And I love that, as we talked about, someone pointed out the well-being slide that Jesse shared. So now I'm going to pass the mic over to Daniel. The world is yours, sir. Take it away.
Thank you, John. Wow, I could not be happier to follow Jesse in that. First of all, Jesse, it is always amazing to hear you present. But I just love how the components of this conversation today fit together so well. So I have another brainstorm question for the group, and would love for you to write in the question box your answer to this. So how does staff wellness impact how we engage with youth? And I'm tacking on with other adults, because this work we do to support young people, we do it together. So how does staff wellness impact how we engage youth and other adults? So share your thoughts in the question box.
We have an answer that already came through. Staff wellness is essential for creating a positive and supportive environment for youth and adults. When staff are feeling their best, they are better equipped to engage with others in a way that fosters growth, development, and resilience.
Wow, very nice. Thank you, Viviana. I see some other answers here. Too much change at once causes cognitive dissonance. If we as adults are not regulated, how can we be the regulators for children and youth? Absolutely. Kids can sense tension, prevent burnouts. If we're not well, it's really hard to get our students well. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for writing this in here. The level of motivation and energy is directly impacted by staff wellness. It allows for better communication, listening skills. It takes a team to support, and when we are 100%, we are better able to support. Thank you so much. Excellent. Well, let's go to the next slide, because I want to share a few resources with you all to help us all reflect on our own wellness. So this is Healthier Generations Healthy Day Checklist. It's just one resource in our Healthy Day Toolkit that's part of our Kohl's Healthy at Home resource collection. And I want to give it a try together with you all today. So which part of this checklist is your favorite? So there's connection, nutrition, movement, learning, celebration, and rest. Which part of that checklist is your favorite? And if you want to celebrate, maybe you have a win, there's an area of this checklist that you are particularly doing well at, feel free to use today as a celebration. I see rest and movement, movement, connection, connection. Model the behavior you wish to see in others. If we want students who can practice SEL, our staff need to know how to model that. Love that, Cassandra. Celebration, nutrition, celebration, movement, rest, rest with exclamation marks. Absolutely. So there is a QR code that I have on this slide. So if you want the Healthy Day checklist, just snap that QR code and you can get to that resource. I think it's a really nice way to think about staff wellness in an approachable way. I always love a checklist too. Connection, all of it, movement and rest. Thank you all so much for writing in the question box. And John and Amanda, if you all see something that I missed, please chime in. Penny, I like this. I love it all. The answer for me would be different depending on the day. Excellent.
Sleep would be my favorite, but kids don't let me get much rest. Probably connection is my favorite. Love that answer.
Excellent. Absolutely, Sharon, you are very welcome. All right, so you've got the Healthy Day checklist. Again, you got the QR code here, so snap that, you can get that resource. But we're gonna keep moving because I've got a couple more resources that I'm very excited to share with you all today. So we can go to the next slide. So the first activity, we're gonna do this together. This is a restful grounding activity. It's one of my absolute favorite. It is from another Kohl's Healthy at Home resource from Healthier Generation called Nature-Based Bingo. We are going to collectively check off one of these squares together today. And the square we're going to check off is flower breath. Smell a flower, breathe deep, and practice mindfulness. And don't worry, you don't have to go outside. This is a visualization exercise. And I hope you can put this in your back pocket and use it whenever you need it. But the first step is just to get comfortable. So wherever you are, get comfortable. We're gonna do a collective flower breath together. I know there's several hundred folks on the line today, so I'm excited to do it as a big group. So find your comfortable spot, and I want you to visualize a flower. Now, if you're like, Daniel, I don't want to visualize a flower. I want to be at the beach. I want to be at the forest. Be wherever you want to be. Visualize wherever makes you happy. And then we're going to take a big, deep breath in together. And you might smell that flower. Maybe you smell the ocean. Maybe you smell the trees. And a big, deep breath out. So we're going to do this 5 times together. So big, deep breath in. Big, deep breath out. You might smell the flower as you breathe in, and you might blow the petals as you breathe out. 3 more times, actually. Big, deep breath in. Deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. And one more, just because. Big, deep breath in, and let this be make the biggest sigh you possibly can when you exhale. Big, deep breath in, and just let it all out. So again, this is just one activity from this resource, Nature-Based Bingo. Would love for folks, tell me how that was. Put a word or 2 in the question box here. How do you feel after you did flower breath? I feel instantly calmer. How do you feel after flower breath? Carly says refreshed. Alex says grounded. Becca says refreshed. Sharon says calm and relaxed. Cassandra says recentered. Selena says definitely more relaxed. Jenny says relaxed. Robert says relaxed. Jen says sleepy. Joy says relaxing. Nathan says so much more relaxed. Emily says relaxed. Awesome. I am so happy that you did flower breath with me. Again, you've got this in your back pocket. Come back to it whenever you need. Sometimes I find myself at the grocery store thinking about flower breath. All right, again, there's a QR code here so you can get Nature-Based Bingo. It is yours, but reach out and let me know what you do for the free square. I'd love to know what you add. All right, one more activity we're gonna do together. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a brand new Nature Bingo. As you can tell, we love simple resources at Healthier Generation. So this was created in partnership with our friends over at Blue Star Families. They're doing amazing work to support the military community and military families. So we're gonna check off mindful sound together. And I don't know if anyone here has ever done sound mapping, but I hope you'll give it a try today. It can help reduce stress and improve focus and concentration. And like many Healthier Generation resources, it's pretty simple. All you need is a sheet of paper and a pencil. So if you want to play along today, just grab a scrap sheet of paper and a pencil. And I want you to write your name at the center. Back to what Jesse was sharing, people get ready. So let's put yourself at the center of this sound map. And I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And I want you to take notice of the sounds that you hear. Could be sounds that are close, sounds that are far away. And just make a little note on your map. You could draw a line to that sound. Or if you're just feeling the need to just be present today and you don't even want to write it down, that's totally okay too. And let's say that you're not into the sound map, but you want to look for colors or textures. Feel free to adapt this however you like today. So I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes. And we are all going to do sound mapping. So the timer starts now. I'm going to be as quiet as I can. And just take notice of the sounds that you hear. Sounds that are close or sounds that are far away. So we have about 40 seconds on our sound map. Maybe take a nice deep breath as we get into the 30-second mark. All right, that was 2 minutes. So thank you for participating in the sound mapping exercise from Nature Bingo. So I would like to know, what did you notice when you were doing sound mapping? And maybe if you want to share how you're feeling in the question box. What did you notice and how are you feeling? I always like doing this activity because I feel like I observed something I never paid attention to before. Thanks, Becca, for sharing. You said your walls at work are very thin. It's hard to relax when you're focusing on those sounds. Fair enough. Christy says the outside door is really squeaking. Rochelle says felt aware. Latasha says feel present. Stephanie shared clock ticking, birds tweeting outside, electronics. Tiffany shares how silent it was and how aware of the outside sounds you became. Nicole says, this made me focus on one thing rather than a million things. I'm glad to hear that. Excellent. Well, again, this is in your toolbox now. If you need a break, want to focus, you can come back to sound mapping. Again, just one activity on the Bingo at Home resource we created with Blue Star Families. And again, there's a QR code here so you can get that resource. So my final slide is an invitation for you all to join a celebration. So celebrating, of course, is on that Healthy Day checklist. And right now at Healthier Generation, we are in the home stretch of taking applications for America's Healthiest Schools. One of the categories of America's Healthiest Schools is actually on cultivating staff well-being. So I hope every single person on this call today, and if you're listening before April 18th, 2023, will encourage a school near you or your school to apply for America's Healthiest Schools, especially if you're doing creative work around staff well-being or social emotional health and learning. Huge shout out to Harmony, SEL, and National University. They're actually our sponsors for those categories. And would love to have any of you apply apply for America's Healthiest Schools, and please, please share with schools that you're connected with as well. So with that, I thank you for playing along, and I'll turn it back to you, John.
Thank you, sir. I definitely appreciate everything that you shared. So kind of what stood out for me, I love that you took us there. And by taking us there, I mean the visualization, the breathing. And I love that you actively engaged us in the activities. And so same thing for our audience. What's something that resonated with you that Daniel shared? I have to share one other thing from Daniel. When we were cultivating this workshop, we were having a conversation, myself, Daniel, and my former director. And one of the things that Daniel talked about, a strategy, is that we want to make sure we give staff their personal space, their time, their downtime. And so he brought up the fact that sometimes we send or receive emails, like on the weekend, after hours, late in the evening. And I had to laugh because there was a time when I used to send my director emails 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And I thought about years ago when I was a principal, my superintendent used to send me messages at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I would think, hasn't she relaxing? And so the same thing applied to me. So that was definitely a strategy that resonated with me. So from our audience, Amanda, what are you seeing there?
Great responses. It's good to have time to stop and be present in the moment. It just helped me focus. Marianne shared. I noticed sounds I didn't pay attention to before. It's the small things that we can do throughout the day for our self-care and reflection. I love this.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those. And now we're going to pass the mic to Caitlin. And again, I'll turn my camera off, I'll turn my microphone off, and now the world is yours.
Thank you so much, John. And yeah, what an honor to be here with all of you today, getting a chance to share a bit about this research and this resource, and really enjoyed getting a chance to listen to Jesse and Daniel as well. And I feel like I'm still in the calm of that flower breath. So what I'm here to talk to you all about today is a new module that was co-developed with Inspire at National University and the U.S. Soccer Foundation, which is where I work. And you know, it's really wonderful to talk about readiness, both staff and individual readiness and organizational readiness, and also to think about how we are ready as those individuals when we step into different contexts to invite the full young person into the space and help them cultivate their own selves, their own SEL skills. And we have a new resource available to everyone that specifically focuses on the context of sport and physical activity and recreation. And while I am with the U.S. Soccer Foundation, I just want to point out that this is not sport specific. It's actually intentionally made to work and be applicable to adult leaders who are working across sport contexts or camp contexts in after school and recreational settings. So while I give you an introduction to what is in the module, I'd encourage you to take those phones out again and scan one of the 2 QR codes here on the screen. They both take you to the online module and allow you to sort of take a look at what you will experience as part of this resource. And so this partnership with Inspire NU really came about in our dual interest in elevating the conversation and bringing the resources around SEL and positive youth development into the sport and recreational space. And I think for all of you on this call who are really immersed and experienced in this topic, what we're advocating for here is that as much as we think about and talk about SEL for practitioners, for educators, in the formal K through 12 space, we also need to do the same in spaces that are outside the classroom, in after school, and particularly of our interest in sports spaces and places where we engage young people in physical activity. And the U.S. Soccer Foundation has been working with young people, particularly in underserved and under-resourced areas, for a very long time. And we have always seen the adult leader in these spaces as a coach mentor, and really intentionally connecting those two roles together. I think this is super important in that we train all of our coaches in the space to make sure they are prepared and ready to embrace both the role that they play as coach in terms of whatever sport they're working with, and also the role of mentor, which for us means being that positive adult role model who's able and willing to develop positive relationships with youth in that sports space throughout whatever duration that season or that camp or that clinic is, with those young people. And so our partnership with Inspired National University has allowed us to move from the work that we've been doing, particularly in-person, on-the-ground spaces, to scaling and reaching practitioners like yourselves across the country with this training that's really focused on bringing SEL and positive youth development into the sport practitioner space. And so what we're going to share with you, if you can move to the next slide, is a little bit about what you'll experience in the module. So what we have here is what we call the Coach Mentor Blueprint. And what this is a framework for thinking about how the adult leader can prepare for, initiate, develop, and then ultimately close out and honor really positive relationships with youth over the course of a sports season, or a sport camp in the summer, et cetera. And the blueprint tracks the time frame of engagement with a young person. And we like to use this analogy of building a house, right? We know when we build a house, there are certain steps that have to take place in a certain order for the house to be built. We have to build a foundation and put up the walls and the electric and the plumbing, and ultimately we get to put a roof on the house and do the decorations, and we have a home. And so similarly, when we think about building relationships, there's a lot of work that has to be done on the front end before an adult leader even meets the young person they're going to work with, things that they can think about to really prepare for that first moment of connection, to start to develop a positive relationship. How does that relationship grow and strengthen over time? How is it sustained? And as trust is built, how do we use that relationship to both elevate the skills that young people are learning in the space and also help them think about how they connect and can be utilized to other components of their life or other spaces in their life? And then ultimately, what does it look like to make sure that that relationship is honored, that it's closed out in a really positive way, that young people are connected to other resources, in that those young people want to come back, they want to engage in your programs again in the future, and they want to engage with other adult coach mentors or teachers, right, in the different spaces. And so that is the framework for the module. The module is 1 hour and it's asynchronous. There's lots of opportunities in the module for engagement. So if you could just flip to the next slide. Much like other in wonderful Inspire modules, there are lots of moments for reflection. And this is reflection that allows us that moment to step back and revisit, why do we do what we do? What's the really core value or interest in our own self, right, that brings us into this space with youth. It also allows us to reflect on the way that the skills that are learned throughout the module really fit within your own localized environment. And so we want to offer moments for you to take the material and connect them back and think about, how do they work in your setting as a soccer coach or in your setting as a physical education teacher. There's also many interactive elements to practice some of the SEL skills that are within the module itself. So if you see here on the bottom right, there's an activity around building a team code. So thinking about how do you set those boundaries, those rules that are really going to set the culture for your group together over the course of that season or that semester or that camp. And so this gives us a chance to think about and to practice some of those skills that we might be learning in the module and then take them back into the spaces that you all will work with your young people. We're gonna go to the next slide. So I think two other really nice aspects of this module is, one, we get a chance to hear from several former athletes and current athletes. So here on the bottom left, you see Kobe Jones, former national team player for our national soccer team, former player professionally. He's now a commentator, so you'll probably see him on your TV in the lead up and at the 2026 World Cup. We also have Brianna Pinto, who was in one of the early slides in my segment, who is also a former national team player and plays with the NWSL, the National Women's Professional League, North Carolina Courage, also Monty Dorsey, who similarly plays pro and nationally. And they really speak to the importance of having had a really good coach mentor or several coach mentors early on in their experience and how that's led to their successes at this point in time. Additionally, there are several amazing coach mentors who are scattered across the country and working in youth programs, so boys and girls clubs, parks and recreation programs, independent sport clubs, and they talk a little bit about the experiences they see their young people have who have coaches who really embrace this mentorship role as well. And then I think maybe the most critical thing about this module that's really important is what you see here on the right is, while we've been doing with the foundation, the blueprint in person and with coaches for a very long time, this partnership has really allowed us to elevate and bring the amazing, deep well of resources in SEL that Inspire National University have into the sport and after school space. And so while we might have a moment in the course where we invite coaches and staff members to think about, okay, how do you address this difficult scenario with empathy? Here's a process for doing so. Maybe you want to dig a little deeper into what is empathy? What are the different ways we think about it? What are some of the other frameworks to work through these difficult scenarios that educators take on? And there are links throughout the module to some of these other critical SEL competencies in the Inspire sort of well of knowledge. And so that is fantastic, I think, for all our coaches who are integrating in this space, and hopefully for all of you who might be able to use this as resources with your colleagues and your coaches. So I'd encourage you all to scan the QR code if you haven't already and hop in, take a look around. We have been sharing this broadly with sport organizations nationally, at the regional level, and also with education organizations across the country. So if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me or drop some notes in the chat box. And also, obviously, the Inspire and NU team is as well versed as I am in this, and would be happy to take your questions as well.
Thank you, Caitlin. One of the things that you said early on that really resonated with me is when you spoke on the fact that this is of great value to those of us beyond just youth sports. And I would challenge everyone, or maybe I should say I would invite everyone, regardless of whether you work in youth sports, whether you're working out of school time, whether you're an educator or a parent, I would invite everyone to watch the video, to complete the module, because some of the things that resonated with me and that also apply to, say, Harmony and Inspire is we talked about social skills. We talked about building positive relationships. We talked about helping kids with goal setting. We talk about, well, I say we, in the module it talks about valuing kids' lived experiences. And all of those skills translate to schools, translate to home, translate to all of our environments. And so again, I invite everyone to take a look at the module. Great work that you did on the module, great work in this sharing. And now I want to ask the audience, what was something that Caitlin shared that resonates with you? Again, please put those answers in the question box, and Amanda will gracefully read out some of those for us. And again, Caitlin, thank you for that share. Thank you for the work that you did on the module, and even beyond that, for the quick connection cards that you guys created. We definitely appreciate those as well.
Maybe while we get some people sharing the chat box, to John's point, yes, we also co-created with Harmony at National University some quick connection cards like the one we used at the beginning of the session that are specific for working in a sport and recreational setting. So thanks, John, for the reminder on that. Those are also phenomenal and are attached to the resources in the module.
Yep, thank you again for helping create those. Amanda, what do we have from the question box?
The responses are starting to come in. Make sure you have an agreed definition, so important. Mentoring and coaching isn't just for sports, but for the classrooms, to John's point as well. Thank you for making this available at no cost to us. Yes, we are grateful and hope you take advantage of this incredible opportunity to use this module. I wonder, Caitlin, if you can comment as you've been taking it across the nation, what the feedback has been that you've received so far to organizations that have viewed it.
Yeah, absolutely, Amanda. I think one, to that audience member, thanks for elevating the fact that it is completely free. Our partnership has allowed this resource to go out into the world at no cost to anyone, which I think from an equity standpoint is fantastic. We've been doing our best to share it widely and scream from the mountaintops that it's out there. As a soccer coach and sport professional, I think one of the pieces of feedback I hear often is, it's a really nice addition to any existing coach education in the sports space, which often really focuses on the technical aspects, the tactical aspects of the sport. And this really focuses on the front end, right? Being proactively prepared to invite the full young person in. And ultimately, we know, even at the elite level of sport, right? That's when we get the most enjoyment from players, the most focus, they get the most out of the actual sport coaching that coaches can do. And so this has been really well received broadly at competitive club settings, as well as at Parks and Rec and Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs. And so we're just excited that it's growing, and this is becoming a more standard part of the coach training that everyone's receiving.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda, for asking that question. And Caitlin, thank you for sharing with us what the experience has been. This time, I want to invite my other two panelists to come back. And what I'd like to do now, normally I have questions at the ready, but what I want to do is pass the mic to my three panelists to just ask questions of one another, expound on kind of what you heard from one another, and just do a deeper dive, if you would. And anyone can start the conversation. I'll throw out kind of a conversation starter, something that was in the coach mentoring module. And you can transfer it to however it applies to you, but it's, why do you coach? And I thought as an educator, we sometimes would ask teachers for good and bad, why are you a teacher? And so kind of thinking along that, but again, I'm gonna turn off my mic, pass the mic to you guys.
John, I love that you asked that question, because the one thing I was wondering about, Jesse, thinking about readiness, is like, how do we start a conversation with folks? Like, there's several hundred people who dialed into this who are interested, but when talking to other folks and teammates, like, how do we get them excited or bring up the topic of readiness? And John, I feel like you almost answered my question that I'm asking right now. I love that, asking why do you, getting to the source of someone's why. But Jesse, I don't know if you want to dig into that, but that's something I'm interested in.
It's a great question. And John, I appreciate what you asked too, because I feel like so many of us, I think the 3 or 4 of us are a little more removed from the on the ground work, but not entirely, right? Like, we came to this because we care about young people, because we want to create optimal learning and development experiences, and we know what's good for kids, right? And most people come to their programs, I think, for that same reason. But sometimes we get so caught up in the what we have to do, what the program model is, what is required of us, that we might lose track of that a little bit, right? So I think coming back to your why is important. I will say that the term readiness really bothers me. I can't change it. It's in the literature. Everyone's wrapped onto it, but it's kind of a misnomer, because it sounds like you have to do it at the beginning of something new. Social and emotional learning, this is the heart of what we do in the out of school time and youth development space, right? We maybe don't always call it that, but we've been doing this. So why, I get a lot of Jesse, why are you coming at me with this readiness stuff? We've been here. So I think sometimes a good way to introduce this is as a reflection tool on something you've already been doing, right? And just kind of that recalibration. It's helpful if you are introducing something new. Let's say some of the tools like that Caitlin you shared today, right? If you want to improve your practice or change it to use that tool, for example, thinking about readiness for that could be useful. We'll put in the chat too. We have a getting started guide. We've gotten a lot of feedback on that, so we're developing a part 2 to that, but we do have the first part ready. But yeah, so I think coming at it in those ways, either starting something new or as an opportunity to reflect, right? And I think for those program leaders who are on the call right now, especially, right, just being sensitive to the fact that this is something we should think about, and that staff well-being is something we should pay attention to. we're all having these conversations now, but we maybe haven't been having them as intentionally for maybe as long as we should, you know? So, I don't know, Caitlin, do you have thoughts? I'm watching your face.
Yeah, I mean, I had the benefit of going last, right? So I got to listen to you and then Daniel, and I think, you know, my brain was just connecting with all the ways and the information and resources that you all share, right, connects exactly into the conversation about the module. And, you know, I love how you framed it like readiness is ongoing, because I think, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, Daniel, you shared all these wonderful resources. Okay, at what point do we start to integrate that or where? And it's like, this is just a continual, there's not one entry point, right? There's a continual add, right? There's every organization or every individual is going to be at a certain place in their own growth as an adult leader or educator. And there's always a good place to start, and different people or organizations start in different ways. And so I think I really liked getting a chance to see those different pieces and how they can, yeah, it's kind of choose your own adventure as how you start to bring them into the space, but do choose an adventure of some sort, right?
I heard someone say the other day, we were talking about tools like this, and they got at, there was some resistance because you can't always see the ROI, the return on investment for doing things like this, for taking time. We've got to go, we've got things to do. And you know, maybe we need to expand our definition of how we think about return on investment, because I think at this point in our work with young people, we need to stop, we need to pause, we need to, you know, choose your own adventure. I don't think there's anything more important than doing that right now.
Well, Jesse, to that point, there's a comment in the question line here. Junie put this in. For me, coaching, mentoring is life-saving. I think that gets to the ROI there.
Yeah, and I would agree. I'll just chime in a little bit. I would agree with that too. Spending so much time as an educator, it's that same thing. When we work with kids, and everyone on the call, I'm sure, can relate to this. When we work with kids, we don't necessarily see what happens with them, the growth right away. We plant the seeds and we know that growth is coming, but we may not see it right away. So that can't be our measuring stick that they're doing 100% better right now, because we all grow and develop over the span of our life. And so we give them that space to do that. I love that we kind of clarified, or Jesse specifically kind of clarified where we're starting and kind of clarified what readiness is and isn't, because I think it is sometimes a misnomer. Well, we're already doing this. How do we get ready for something we're already doing? And so I love that clarification. I love that we tied it all back to social and emotional learning, because pretty much everything we do in life, one of our former directors, Nick, used to always say, and a lot of us have coined the phrase now, all learning is social and emotional. And that is very true, and that is very important. You know, you build those relationships with kids. Again, I'll go back to the module, because one of the things that resonated so much with me is how much more you get out of students. And I knew this from being an educator and a person for that matter. The more you build those relationships, the more you get out of it. The more you show kids that you value them, you value their lived experiences, you value where they come from, what they bring to the table, and you don't project what you think they should be, could be, what they have lived onto them, and allow them to be their authentic selves. You build stronger relationships that don't just carry you through the season, which is great that they do, but they carry those kids through their lifetime, and it builds relationships that last a lifetime. Now, obviously, we could go on and on and on and have this conversation, but a couple of things as I close out, a couple of things I want to say. Resources right here available for you guys. And again, you'll receive this recording so you can access the resources. Please take advantage of these resources that are here. Great work. I want to applaud and thank my guests again for your amazing shares, for the amazing resources you shared, and just for being who you are and doing what you do in the space that you do it in. For our audience, I want to ask that as our webinar comes to a close, we're going to launch a brief survey, and I ask that you please complete those surveys. We always use what we learn from those surveys. We share the results with our presenters. We also have long discussions around your responses so that we can continue to build and grow. As we said, we're forever building, we're forever growing, we're forever developing. Thank you everyone for being here today. As per usual, I hope that you are better for having spent this hour with us, as I know I'm better for having spent it with my three wonderful guests and with my audience. Enjoy the rest of your day, and let this be the beginning of the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.